Let's call this video or exploration through the eye of a needle. And the reason for this exploration is that in my experience, everyone has a maze, a series of complex filters, often unconscious, that a relationship has to make its way through in order to have a chance of landing in the conscious mind as something to pursue, as something valuable. And there's all kinds of pitfalls and filters that have developed along the way, some intelligent, some insane, some schizophrenic, that determine whether a given couple has a 1 in 70, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 chance of developing a meaningful relationship. And many of these filters are developed in various states of childhood and formative experiences. Some of them are based on traumatic experiences. But universal to almost all filters for a loving relationship is that nobody will tell you what they are. There's a long and circuitous route. You could take a number of people and find 1,000 people that were interested in relating to them. And the question would be, why were they all shunted off? Why was this blocked here and that blocked here? And what was the mechanism? So that's what I'm going to look at here for myself, because while it might be nice to think that this or that person doesn't have a series of filters, a series of roadblocks to going deeper in a meaningful way because they haven't talked about them, that just makes things 10 times more difficult, because trying to navigate this number of hurdles without a roadmap is, statistically highly improbable. So what are some of my filters that a relationship has to go through? Well, one of the first is the formative attachment template with a child and a parent. In a healthy child-parent relationship, a child forms at least one secure emotional attachment. But when both parents are traumatized and distancing with their own feelings, they will also put up maps to stop the empathy for their children taking them into their own feelings. And so it was very difficult to form a strong emotional bond within my family. And what's emerged out of that is an insecure attachment template. Now, how I experience this is that it's relatively easy for me to be very, very close in a safe, sane, high-presence relationship. In the 5 love languages, it would relate to quality time. And it's very easy for me to lose that feeling of attachment. And then the only other option for me is an extreme dissociation. So in normal childhood development, you'd have a nice gradient map where the child gets to explore in relationship to their mother, being closer, being further away, a variety of things like this. That mid-range didn't occur for me. So there's no instinctual template there. There's just fully connected and fully disconnected. And it takes more work for me to stay fully connected. So in the United States, for example, there's a tremendous focus on independence and autonomy. And my experience of American women, particularly younger women, is that this is expressed by no one's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to do what I want, when I want, how I want, without consulting anyone. And in so doing, I will prove that I'm my own person. So that being the ideal within the American cult, that becomes one of the methods. No man's going to tell me what to do and all of that. Well, one of the fallouts of acting arbitrarily and dissociatively is it makes it much harder to form a secure attachment. My response is not to have any attachment at all. I remember one woman who came to my house for a date, and after a little bit, she said, "Bye, I'm leaving." So pretty abrupt. And I said, would you mind staying a little bit and disengaging together? Include me in the process of separating. And she said, "No, I'm going." And I told her at the time, because I know this attachment template, I said, I'm going to say goodbye to the relationship. And, she'd proved her macho-ness and, all that and left. And then she called me next week and wanted to get together. And I said, no. What you need to do in the way of, asserting yourself, proving your independence, is to act unilaterally. But I can't keep a secure emotional template with someone whose primary objective is to behave dissociatively. In other words, you want to do what you want, coming together, doing without attuning, without including me. Now, I don't think that's a great way of relating. I don't agree with the American hierarchy of all this focus on no one's going to tell me what to do. There are so many bizarre and ignorant Americans in so many areas that it would be much more intelligent to say, let's find someone who knows what they're doing and invite them to tell me what to do until I know what I'm doing here. But that's not the American way. And, that's what makes a culture a cult. We do things because we do things, and that's why we do things, whether they work or not. So she was furious that I wouldn't see her again. But I think she would be just as furious at the idea of actually telling a partner, meaning treating a partner as a part of the engagement. Would you like to get together? What would make this a good way of getting together for you? I'd like this. What would you like? Where do we come together? Where do we disconnect? And would you mind if we brought our time to a close at this time? Is there anything incomplete or that you'd like to do before we separate? I'm moving in that direction. And actually attuning. Having a relay, a relationship, as opposed to get the fuck out of my way. I'm doing what I'm going to do, and I'm looking for the kind of person who, will adjust their lives to allow this, unilateral stuff. So that's the first kind of pattern or area where a majority of Americans are not predisposed to attune. No, the exact same thing happens at the end of a relationship. Even if it's a unilateral ship, It does take two people to say yes and one person to say no. And so the same type of person who just walks out in the middle of something without feeling any need to communicate or attune or adjust behavior or check in also leaves a relationship. I'm done. I've got what I want. You're not my man, whatever, and off they go. This is, unfortunate in both cases. Endings tend to have a lot of impact, and they tend to be done very poorly, and they are great learning opportunities. So we'll come to the next issue. I like to have a conversation early on in a relationship about how both people would like to end the relationship well. Do you want a text from me saying, bye and thanks for all the fun? Do you want an email? Do you want a meeting? Do you want to know what isn't working and what's working? Do you want to do a joint therapy session? What's an ideal ending for you? Number one, and what's a terrible ending for you? Because if your partner isn't psychic and the default in the cult is sloppy, often traumatic and abrupt endings, then what makes you think that ours would buck the trend with no effort to do anything different? So I believe that an intelligent and experienced relationship partner understands that many times endings cause unnecessary suffering because of the timing and protocol and lack of attunement of the ending, which brings up pain, coupled with the loss of identity. That if you've had a meaningful relationship, when you end the relationship, an identity dies in both people. If you walk out of here and never show up again, the part of me that was developed and cultivated in order to connect and attune with you now has no home. That was an identity, a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that was specifically for you. And if I loved who I was around you and you leave, that part of me that I loved dies because there's no one to express that exact part with. That's if the relationship was worth bothering to give birth to a new identity, a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, which is ultimately the greatest gift and opportunity of a relationship, to discover parts of oneself one did not know were there. So I take a skeptical view of the short-sightedness of unilateral behavior around sensitive times. And I don't date people that value that need to prove unilateralness more than they value the desire to co-create a beginning, to co-create a middle, and to co-create an end when one or both people wants to do that ending, but to complete the circle with the same respect and dignity with which it was begun. Again, 5% of people intuitively lean into that, and a great majority of people just get flustered and paralyzed. So let's have a conversation together, which of course takes us a little bit into the unknown. So, you and other people have your different threads of difficulty and hurdles, etc. So I'm talking about mine. And when someone doesn't want to face the possibility of an ending, I generally feel, psychologically it relates to primarily being a child. meaning children do not want their parents to leave. They're caregivers. They want it to be eternal because they're in a dependent state. And I don't want to think about this. I don't want to ever end. Everything ends either by death or one or both people deciding that they can grow more, develop more, experience more well-being and love for themselves in either single or in another relationship. And I don't ever want to tell someone or have them tell me that they're going to be with me forever. Because I don't value that. I want someone to be with me as long as they wake up every day feeling that they'd like to be with me more than any other person that they know and more than being alone. Because if they're with me out of guilt or fear or obligation, it doesn't give me a great feeling. I don't want someone around me with guilt, fear, and obligation. I want the person who wakes up and says, I'm really glad I'm here with you. I could leave. I will leave if that changes. But I'm delighted to be here with you. So that's a filter. Again, if someone will not have that conversation, I figure it's probably not best to begin a relationship if 90% of all relationships do end for reasons other than death, and if it's too traumatic to even discuss that possibility. I think that's intelligent. Now, in order to create that secure attachment, I've noticed that the point at which I begin to become unlaminated and dissociative from the relationship is when we're spending less than 3 hours a day of quality time. Now, it's not always every day, meaning but that's a minimum on average. And that works for me because it bypasses the trauma and uncertainty of an insecure relationship. But it does something else. I've been highly critical of the surprise and incredulity so many couples face when they say, I didn't know this about them. How could this have happened? How did I not see? And they know little or nothing about their partner who lives majority of their life out of view. I've asked a number of American women how many hours they want to spend a week in the relationship, and I would say an average is around 11. If I just say, when do you want to get together, and next week, I look at the time, it's around 11 hours. Well, that's not even 20% of the time in your partner's life. Now, we're always attuning to the people we're with the most. That's biological. That's natural. So if I'm with my coworkers 5 times more than I'm with you, or if I'm with my clients, my coworkers, and my friends more than I'm with you, I'm attuning to them. I'm developing primary identities, primary patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being with them. And of course you don't know what those are about because you're not there. And the question is, why aren't you there? Why don't you know this? And why are you surprised that a great deal of activity goes on when you're not there? That there isn't time to catch you up on, even if you asked, which you don't. And I don't like the game of being busy not asking, not listening, and then being surprised that, oh my gosh, I had no idea. It's a bit of a joke. So I like to begin a relationship by flooding it with data, dispel the projections, bring in the facts. And I do that early on, but some people find it a little bit too methodical, not romantic. I have no interest in seducing someone who is not going to be happy with the facts as they are. And early on in my lover explorations, I expressed, sexual interest in a woman. She expressed receptivity and interest in me. We got into bed and formed an attachment, meaning she was attached to continuity of the relationship, and so was I. And then facts started to emerge about our incompatibility. And a number of these women complained, why didn't you tell me this before? As if somehow, I got the message that even though they didn't ask, and even though they made a lot of projections, and even though there wasn't time to tell them before, and they said they'd love to have sex, that maybe they just don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to have the conversations that will tell them whether or not I'm a good match for them. But they will be upset if they get attached to me and then discover not that they don't like having sex with me, but that they're attached to someone who's incompatible logistically in some way or emotionally in some way. And a lot of it is, frankly, the time issue. I would say that efficiency is one of the higher deities in the American cult. And, that naturally extends to relationship. Let's make it all happen, have lots of sex, and just do it efficiently and not, bother getting to know each other or maintaining the relationship. And I'll do my thing and you'll do your thing. We'll have this, and it'll just magically work. Well, any fool can tell you that statistically speaking, that doesn't work very well. And a lot of the time. And so if you want things to work, it does take time. It does take effort. And so I decided that it would be more fun to proactively introduce data before having sex and before a woman becomes attached to what is essentially her projected fantasy of the relationship because she knows little or nothing about me. I decided it would be more fun to gather and share the data, then have sex without the, oh, why didn't you tell me this and that? And I looked at all the areas that had come up, and I interviewed other couples, and it seems like it takes about 10 hours to discuss the things that, if not discussed, are likely to be a surprise or an awkwardness, or I didn't know that. Well, of course you didn't. You didn't ask, and there wasn't time to tell. But how much time does it take, and what do you have to say and share? It takes about 10 hours. Well, here's where we get into the schizophrenia of the culture. Because the same women who were upset at being shocked by not knowing this and that thought it was cumbersome to have to talk about things for 10 hours before having sex. They just wanted, and so, what to make of this, because I'm not interested in surprising people. I'm not interested in being insane either, meaning it's a little bit crazy to be upset and shocked about data that you didn't ask about with someone you know almost nothing about. So, a little bit dumb. And, that's, of course, politically incorrect to say, but I think it's useful to refer to things that actually relate to those meanings. It is a little bit dumb to be shocked as an adult after multiple relationships without knowing anything about your partner. And it is much easier to have sex. And it's actually, it's pretty easy to have sex in wherever I've traveled in the world. Strangely, it's very difficult to find women. See, here's the rub, the problem. What I noticed is that if I asked and talked about issues after a woman was attached to me, because I was her new drug, sex is very, very powerful as a drug, and so is this quality of communication. So if you've got this quality of communication, and a number of people have told me in my life that I understand them more than anyone has ever understood them, and that the quality of communication is extraordinarily high. So you've got understanding, you've got exquisite communication, you've got knowing and being known, you've got a lot of empathy and acceptance as a sensitive. I bring that. And then you've got beautiful sex, and then you've got all these fantasies about the other person, about your ideal that haven't had a chance to dissipate. And what I would find is that after having sex, if I asked a woman, what would be a comfortable routine for us to engage with? Or tell me about your ideal marriage or your ideal partner, and what's your preference for boundaries around sensuality? I believe that we are a touch-starved culture, and so, hugging and cuddling and stuff, I think are very healthy with both genders, independent of anything sexual. But we're also, a relationally and emotionally immature culture with all kinds of teenage jealousies and stuff. And so, it's a bit late after you've decided that's your man to decide that you don't want him looking at anyone, let alone cuddling with them. It's a bit late if they haven't made that agreement and they believe in this or that, And so it's what I found was that women were warping their answers to tell me what they thought I wanted to hear because they didn't want the drug withdrawn. They didn't want it to end. Now, this meant it was really hard to see them clearly and to be able to get a sense of, was I really a good fit for them in the long term? So the idea of discussing that, so my strategy has been to be dispassionate. For example, I'm married at the present, at the moment, and we're in an open marriage framework. But when I was meeting my wife, I did not seduce her in any way. What I did was we were exploring a mentorship and friendship. And I told her, I said, I want you to think about it. And I didn't praise her or flatter her or comment about her body. I deliberately stayed away from anything seductive. And that's part of inviting the rational mind to really be present rather than, get lost in these decisions. Because an infatuated instinct can be very destructive. And I want people's rational mind on board. with what we do and don't do. So I said, I said, don't feel this as kind of any thing coming from me, first of all. I said, secondly, I'm very happy to stay being friends with you and doing this and this together indefinitely. I said, thirdly, there are a number of reasons against taking this relationship romantic. I said, romantic relationships tend to be shorter than friendships, in that they can also be less valuable. I have a bad track record in terms of 100 lovers in my life, about how long the average one lasts. And so here's a whole list of reasons not to move towards romance with me and to maintain the friendship. I said, however, if you think about it and you decide and believe it would be a good choice for you, then I'm open to a romantic relationship. And she said she wanted a romantic relationship right away. And so it moved in that direction. But, fortunately it worked out, meaning 4 years later, we're married and have brought tremendous value to one another. And the reason we're opening the relationship at this time is it's clear there are a number of areas where she doesn't want to connect there. They're just not her peak interest, but they are mine. That's one issue. The other issue is in the United States, I've flunked out, seeking to secure 40 different male friendships in a meaningful way with quality time and commitment and, vulnerability. It's not a good cult for that. And so most of my quality engagement have been with women. Now, that's not ideal. It's just the reality of this cult, that to have this kind of communication, it's no male has ever approached me and asked for it in my entire life. I mean, that's saying a lot as a statistic. And the men that I've approached, I have to ask about 40 before one hesitantly says yes, and I'm just tired of spending all that energy. And so, so that then moves towards women. And I'm highly attracted to most women who I have a meaningful rapport with. So if we're tracking this conversation and it's going well, I'm into you. And I believe in integrating heart, mind, and body when possible. An integrated relationship is stronger as a general rule. Now, it's also true that many women are not willing to invest. Going back to the 10-hour conversation, I can successfully stave off the lust in a woman by, having no emotional affect and not courting her and just taking us through the conversation so that I can get honest answers. However, as soon as a woman has no lust for me, a good chunk of American women feel they're wasting their time to have a good conversation. So it's very schizophrenic. It's not an easy path in the United States to go towards a mature, and I'll just pause a moment and talk about that because it's one of my filters. Child love is I need you. And an infant does need you. An infant, a child needs you. And when you fall in love, I need you, right? It's child love. Moves into adolescent love. I want you. I desire you. And you can see children and adolescent all over the world conniving to have sex with people who maybe don't want to have sex with them, manipulating this, not passing on messages from ex-boyfriends and all this type of thing because I want you, I need you, and I don't want anyone else to have you. So you've got child and adolescent love. They are self-absorbed and a pain in the neck in many cases because it's no great favor to the object of love to be bullied, manipulated, coerced, and pulled on constantly to meet the needs of the immature child and adolescent in the partner because this cult doesn't teach people how to be adults. Now, that's just the way it is, but that's child and adolescent love. Now, adult love is the first love that moves outward. And it's the kind of love that if you're lucky, somebody has for you. Because adult love is not about me. Adult love comes when we personally meet the needs of our inner child, of our inner adolescent, enough to be interested in what's great for the other person. So an adult who's, may begin a relationship a little bit like I did with my wife. What's best for you? What's best for you? When my wife and I were having the conversation, when I decided that there was a large enough chunk of unmet needs and preferences in the relationship that I couldn't meet within the relationship and that I was going to pursue that, I asked my wife, what is best for you? And we spent some time, going through, she could live here, she could do this, I could help her meet this type of man, we could do this, she could do this kind of business or that type of business. What's best for you? And when an adult loves you, it's not with a primary selfish agenda. It's, I want to see you happy. I want to see you be your best self. This is unfortunately quite rare in our culture. And I understand the distinctions. I don't have any problem with the child love and the adolescent love. However, I consider the relationship parasitic if the adult or the friend is not at least 51% of the relationship. You want the friend who cares the most for you and wants your back and wants your great future to be the deciding vote in how they behave. In other words, they need to be 51% of the relationship. And I've certainly had women throw themselves at me and try and manipulate and possess me in every particular way, but I don't feel loved by that because they're not being loving. They're being possessive and manipulative, etc., to meet their needs with no regard for how it affects me. And so, I'm interested in an adult relationship with a woman who's mature enough to be interested in knowing enough about me to have a sense of what's good for me and wanting that for me, rather than pulling on me. Would you mind doing this? Don't do that. I don't want you to do this. And the focus isn't actually on seeing who the person is and helping them be happy. Now, the child and adolescent, as we move on to yet another little difficult needle to go through, the child and adolescent need to be happy in the relationship. There's no doubt. But they need to be happy by finding a compatible partner who genuinely blossoms within the presence of the adolescent possessiveness and passion and lust and the child's need and wanting to be close and safe. And I like women who love their tenderness, love their empathy, love their inner child. I love emotional women. Now, this somewhat ties in with, another parental dynamic, which was being humiliated into dissociation from my own feelings by both of my parents. It's very difficult to cry. It's very difficult to show the full range of emotion in my body. But I find that when I'm around a courageous, mature, emotional woman, she gives me the courage. She kind of shows me what that's like, because I don't have a strong template for that. So I'm always in awe and grateful to kind, tender, very emotional women, because I can generally follow them into deeper feelings and into deeper expression of feelings than I can otherwise. And I need that. I want that. I respect and value that. So that is somewhat rare. Now, I've mostly found that in American women over 50 years old. And so a lot of the women that I've dated have been over 50. Or in Asian women. Thai women, Filipino women tend to be more comfortable with their feelings. I love that. My wife can cry anytime she wants, and it's, I envy it. It's a beautiful, cathartic moment. Now, another kind of piece to kind of slip through is, in order to have a partnership, to collaborate as friends and support one another, we have to have all the data. When you have secrets, you're encouraging someone based on inadequate data. So no secrets and no lies. I've never lied to a friend. I've never lied to a partner. I've never cheated on a partner. And I have a low tolerance for that because it's insane. If someone cares about you and you withhold a major piece of data that affects your well-being or their well-being, it's a betrayal of the friendship. It means they can't coach and advise you based on all the facts. And I don't like that. I don't want to play guessing games. And so one of the reasons that I like high quality time is high transparency. Now, there's another tie-in with that, though. I mean, certainly all of my best relationships and the best relationships that I know of include and share transparent data candidly with both people. It's just practical. You can kind of think of it as if you're a car and you're driving on the highway and there's another car and they turn their lights off at night and you hit them. You didn't want to hit them. Why did you hit them? Because you couldn't see them. Why couldn't you see? Because they hid. They turned off their lights. They're saying, I don't want you to see me here. I'm afraid. I'm guilty. I'm scared. I'm afraid I'm going to be punished and judged, so I'm going to hide here. And then you hit them without knowing they're there psychologically. You run over a trigger because they wouldn't tell you what the trigger was, because they didn't want anyone to know, because they were ashamed, whatever. It's incredibly frustrating to constantly hit roadblocks that you had no warning about because someone was actively hiding them from you when you were actively trying to not hit them, but failed because their lights were out. That's a mindset. Now, I think that this is mature and intelligent, and I want a woman who understands that. I mean, first of all, if she thinks that I'm out to hurt her, get away from me, please. And, question your filters, because, that's, while all of us have some, frustration, irritation, and immature parts that want to hurt back, when they've been hurt, the place that I go to is I've been hurt by this and this, let's deal with that. And if I'm dealing with a unilateral woman who, oh, I'm not going to be controlled and blah, 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 then I leave the relationship so that, they can go hurt somebody else and be unilateral about it and see how that works out for them. Because, if you don't partner to be sensitive around each other's sore spots, then it's going to be problematic. Now, another thing which is maybe relevant, around now is, I have an agenda in this moment where I want to cover, all the different challenge points and points where I come together or diverge from a partner. And I'm doing that. And this will be done when it's done. Now, I find it very efficient. If we were in person, I'd probably pause at each point and check in. But I often talk for, 15 minutes before something I want to say is fully detailed and visible. I'm clear about it, and I think you can be too. I don't like being interrupted because I lose my train of thought. And I don't think it's healthy to interrupt an important thing until it's fully out there, because then you're responding to half of the data, unless it's a quick clarifying question. However, many people don't have a 15-minute tracking ability. And so if you have a 2-minute tracking ability and you listen to something for 15 minutes, you've lost the first 2 minutes at the end, and it's just a muddle. And obviously that's disappointing to me if at the end of that you have no idea what I'm talking about, simply because your tracking scale is, 7 times narrower than mine. And I can listen to someone for an hour and track it all very well. So, and I don't want to be dominating the conversation, but I want to get a thought out before it's interrupted. And that doesn't work for some people. That's a big of enough issue. The way I look at relationships is you're communicating 75% of the time, if it's a good relationship. And so being compatible in communication is more important than being compatible sexually. You sleep 8 hours a day together. I want to be compatible in those 8 hours. You have sex 20 minutes an hour, and you have hours and hours of conversation that is either liberating and creates flow or is frustrating and disconcerting. So I will first try and prioritize presence and communication. Secondly, sleeping and logistics. And thirdly, I have prioritized relationships with women with whom I had zero sexual desire and did not have sex with them, rather than, but were exquisite in our logistics, our flow, our care for one another, our friendship. Hey, we can take a bath together without having sex. We can play games together without having sex. We can sleep together and cuddle without having sex. I'll take quality companionship over sexuality any day. And I'm interested in the first conversation, which brings up another kind of filter, which is coachability. Almost every woman that I have met has required coaching in order to engage with me in a way that I enjoy. Whether it's, would you mind not interrupting? And then if they can and enjoy that, then that's great. But are you welcoming and appreciative of coaching? Or do you see it as an affront? Because I'm going to ask you how to love you well. how to make you feel completely and totally loved. Once I'm clear that entering the relationship is likely to benefit your life, I want to know how to love you fully and deeply. And how am I doing? Do you want to give me some pointers? I want to know how you like your food seasoned. I want to know how you like to be touched. I want to know what you want to talk about. I want to know the gifts you enjoy receiving and how you like to receive them. Because I want you to have a stunning experience. And a number of women have told me this is the most amazing experience of being loved I've had in my whole life. It's not accidental. It's because I want the woman I care about to have that experience. And why not? Why not ask someone for, some pointers and tips and give it to them? And by the same token, no woman I've met has guessed my love languages, my map into my experience of great love. Now, many have tried, blundering around and making all kinds of, ridiculous projections and mistakes because, oh no, don't tell me. I'll just do it completely wrong on my own. We're not psychic, and I will tell you exactly how I like to be loved and what pisses me off and why, which is it makes it so easy if you care about the other. If you want to do your own thing and nobody's going to tell me what to do, go do your own thing and nobody will tell you what to do. But in a relationship, I want someone who's coachable and willing to coach me. Very important. And not everyone does. Some people just want it to happen, or they're all about the sex and, they don't care that, we're completely incompatible in 80% of the areas. And so, sex comes last as the primary thing. And that ties in with often picking older women, though the greatest lover physically of my entire life, well, I think she was like 56 or so. We'd have sex 3 to 5 times a day, ecstatic every single time. And part of what made it so ecstatic was she could never get enough. She just every moment was ecstasy for her. It was so much fun to see how happy she became. And that is a definite steering point for me, is what makes my partner really happy. Including if that means you seem happier away from me. That's why I didn't try to pull my wife towards my interests. Like, you seem happier over here. Do this. Go do this. But I'm going to do this. And so, that brings up another filter, because, I've had monogamous relationships and they're much easier in some ways. And I've had open relationships and they're much more fulfilling in many ways. Is kind of, I like to explore extremes. And so in my extreme of open relationship, I had 8 lovers a week, 1 man and 7 women. And it was just, it was a 24/7 extravaganza, no time for work or anything like that. But every single one of those people were, perfect at some area. My one woman loved my jokes, and so I joked hundreds of % more with her than anyone else. We did sports and tennis and more conventional stuff with this woman. Beautiful gifts and cards and music with this woman, but no sex, and more cuddling and these esoteric conversations for 6 hours a night, starting at midnight. And intuitive exploring and with this woman, and transcendent sex, and a sense of playful innocence with this woman, and dealing with father issues with the male, and all these different things. It was a very, very rich and satisfying week. No part of me felt, one of my worst feelings is feeling like I'm just waiting around because this person isn't showing up, isn't prioritizing. So, so that definitely was very delightful from that, side. And, three American lovers with their roughly 10 hours a week kind of preferences gives me the 30 hours of minimum relational engagement that I like. 30 hours of quality time a week or more is basically, what I look for. And the protocol that seems to be ideal is, start with one person and give the relationship an opportunity to connect in all the ways that are compatible to connect for as much time as both people are enjoying. And if there's remainder time, then look for a relationship that fills in the pieces and fits into that remainder time. And if there's still remainder time, then look for a relationship that fills in those pieces or does similar things and fills in the remaining time. So at this particular moment, the areas that I'm wanting to explore are, one, this kind of conversation back and forth. Two, times in the afternoon, kind of in the noon to 4 window. Three, possible times in Philippines and Thailand for, a week or let's say 2 weeks to a month at a time. And 4, late night on the phone or Zoom. Again, maybe 10 p.m. to midnight for sure. And I'm doing a lot of writing, et cetera, in the midnight to 5 a.m. Window on a 10x Living book. So those are, some of the pieces. And and talking things through, and being a supportive friend in all of that. So that's, and there's certainly room for sexuality, in that mixed and or sensuality. Now, there's one other thing that is a mixed bag, that as I round this idea through the eye of the needle, because the relationships that take off make it through all of these various filters, and the relationships that don't take off, or very short-lived. So the issue of integrity and sanity have a particular importance for me. Both of my parents lied to the children. It was very painful. And they also lied to themselves. And, they were interested in growth and alternative things. So they would use elaborate collages of half-truths and things like that to not take responsibility, to, in some way betray themselves, each other, the family and the children. It really disgusted me on the one hand. It felt very lonely on the other hand, very painful. And there were so many of these kind of fuzzy, half thought out manipulations or expediencies that I kind of swung hard in the other direction. I've never lied to a friend or partner. I've never cheated on a lover. And I like to take the time to be sane, to deal with the complexities that resolve paradox. Because if you keep it on the surface and you say, I'm sensitive, then it seems paradoxical that I'm very irritable. I thought you were sensitive. Yes. You see, it takes time. Yes. Because I'm sensitive to this thing, it hurts me, and I get impatient when I get dinged there. So I'm more irritable than normal because of my sensitivity to that. You see how it fits together? I'm not saying that I'm sensitive to you irritating me, meaning that I'm all considerate and don't worry about irritating me. I'm saying that I am sensitive, and one of the ways that that expresses itself is being reactive in this area. So now that we understand what sensitivity is and the correlation between insensitive behavior in an area someone is sensitive, now it makes sense. You see, but it took a little time and nuance to piece those together. And I really want to see people. And I think that, my parents were somewhat crazy, somewhat insane, number one. Number two, they hurt us. And number three, one could not predict what they were going to do based on what they said. They lied. They sent confusing messages. So kind of out of that, I really want to know what's going on with a person. I want to know how this and that fits together. I want to see clearly, and I want to collaborate in a way that I can anticipate your behavior because you're a trustworthy and integrated person. Now, this is fear-based. That's one part. There's a panic that comes up when someone seems to be crazy. You said you wanted a partnership, but you're bossing us both around. That's not partnering. Are you aware of that, or are you insane? Do you think that a partnership is one where you're a part and I'm a part? Or do you think a partnership is a collaboration in which I tell you what to do without checking with you? I mean, I want to know what's going on there, because that sounds crazy to me. So some of this is just coming from the panic of a 5-year-old being, manipulated right and left by two somewhat sociopathic, crazy parents. Some of it has come from understanding just how unintegrated and crazy so many people are, and that they are a danger to themselves, to me, and the relationship if they don't take the time to notice these things. And so it's a safety mechanism, but it's also, I believe, that a tremendous amount of our power is locked up by lying to ourselves and others. It's very difficult to have all our power at our disposal if we're really basing our supposed future on a fallacy. You know, you're not going to win this based on this. You're a 2 out of 10 here. You're not a 10. You're competing with 7s. You can win this, but you're going to have to put in the discipline and work, etc., to really get to a 7.5. Are you willing to do it? You got to face the fact that you're a 2, and you got to get and work to be a 7. Are you willing to do that? And if you're not, isn't it cruel to expect and then be devastated when, you get it? And so, I remember one partner who used to complain that I wasn't supportive. But my first form of support comes with, I don't think it's kind to live a delusional life. I want you to really win, not be deluded that you're going to win and fail because everyone around you let you delude yourself into how good or bad you were in this or even what you want. You may pretend you want this, but I've watched what you actually do. You do everything under the sun to avoid doing that. So you may want it, but you want not doing it a lot more. And there's a part of me that is a teacher and really enjoys empowering people with accurate data and truth. That's the more mature part. Then there's just a lonely, scared 3-year-old that just says, please don't drive me insane again. Please don't ask me to believe that you desperately want to do what you are doing everything under the sun to not do. Please don't drive me crazy because you can't face the truth. I don't feel I'm with a real person if you're more committed to lying to yourself than in letting me in. And so I'll bring up, well, what about this? What about that? These don't seem to fit. And so this can be, a number of partners have told me they have grown. Not only do they feel understood and loved and all that, but that they have grown and felt challenged by the relationship more than in any other relationship in their life, which, my first relationship was with, I think she was 58 when I was 26, and she'd spent time with 100 lovers or so at the time, and and so take it for what it, what their feedback is. The feedback that I get from partners is that I'm more challenging and difficult than most relationships, that they grow more than most relationships, that they feel more loved and more intensity of love than most relationships. The relationship is special and unique because the identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that I'm bringing to the relationship is an uncommon recipe. And as an uncommon recipe, in a paradigm where at most I have space for 3 people with a high quality of time, I think it's kind for both of us to be selective as to, what that is. Now, there are a number of niches and niche ways to design a relationship. This whole process is a filter. Do you value yourself, and are you intelligent enough to see that the opportunity that comes from seeing someone this clearly? Because people have told me after, I've actually got this book was somewhat of a making a point, but I got so tired of just how little people knew and how little people knew that they knew, and or knew that they didn't know, that I wrote this book. It's actually my biggest, thickest book, and it's called Into Me, You See, Intimacy, Co-Creating a High-Value Relationship with Me. And, not surprisingly, in our culture, almost no one wanted to read it. They'd much rather date someone for 6 months, have it blow up in their face, spend another 6 months recovering and be in shock that who knew people were like this, rather than actually spend a day to learn how to succeed easily and gracefully with someone that cared about them. We're very attached to our stupidity if it's normal for most of us. And I find that very cruel because, my best friend read this book after living with me for 4 years. And she said she learned 30% new useful data about me and that the rest was accurate. And so one of the main patterns going on is people bumping into things they don't see in this cult. You don't have to. That's when you can break easily. So thank you for watching this, and I'm sure that if it speaks to you enough to reach out, we've probably got some good conversations ahead of us.